Redditors who like to explore abandoned buildings or places, what's the scariest experience you've had? I was exploring this really awesome abandoned Victorian-era mansion turned mental asylum. It had everything. A stone ballroom, indoor fountain, huge staircase at the entrance that looked straight out of Resident Evil, a tower, patient rooms, the works. What made it even cooler was that I had stumbled into the place totally by accident. I had been exploring a nearby building on a whim, and as it turned out it connected to the mansion. I had been in there for at least an hour, maybe more, and I only had a few rooms left to explore. I walk into a big one on the top floor of the place, and the first thing I see is a sign that says something along the lines of warning. Extremely high levels of asbestos in this area. Respirators must be worn. If you have been exposed, go to nearby hospitals or immediately. I immediately sprinted the frick out of there, threw my clothes in the wash first thing when I got home, and took a really long shower. I also never went exploring again without having a P100 respirator on first. On Angel Island in San Francisco Bay, there's an abandoned World War II military base including an old hospital. You can explore the buildings, but the lower floor staircases have been removed so you can't go up onto the upper floors and potentially get hurt. Well, being reckless 15-year-olds, my friends and I decided to boost the most nimble guy up to the second floor so he could see what it was like up there. Apparently it was mostly like the rest of the hospital, except there was a room on the third floor that was padlocked shut and had keep out painted on the door. Yes, there was photographic evidence, so he wasn't just messing with us. I have no idea what they'd need to keep locked up on the theoretically inaccessible third floor of an abandoned hospital, and I'm not sure I want to know. There's an old abandoned mental asylum near where I live which is pretty creepy. It's got a pretty depressing history. History meaning the stories other kids told me. Anyway, the asylum is huge, and because it's pitch black, it's so easy to get lost. It's like a labyrinth inside, making it very confusing and disorientating. It smells weird and is filled with relics from the past, like hospital beds, machines, etc. But the scariest thing that happened to me personally was the last time I went. Me and my friends walked into a dark room, and the entire floor was missing, apart from a small patch directly in front of the door. As I was walking in, I almost fell completely down the hole, which was like a 2-story drop. I was probably like half an inch from fricking myself up. This wasn't strictly an abandoned building, but my old college campus had an odd building that was shaped like an authentic Scottish castle, down to towers, parapets, walls, etc. Mind you, only the outside was designed to look like a castle, with every room inside being just squeezed in wherever it could fit. So it was already famous for no two rooms being identical, as well as other architectural oddities such as staircases that led nowhere and needing to go up and down a floor to reach a room right next to you. So it was already something of a weird, creepy building. It was used mainly as a dorm, but a lot of it, especially the outer towers and walls, was closed off to the public, so I think those areas should count. And yes, there was a good amount of really weird stuff there. The first time I explored there, I had found a small door that was, mostly, rusted shut on the bottom of one of the rear towers. It was unused, but I could still open it enough to get through, so I came back that night to explore. It led to a small, circular room on the inside of the tower with a bunch of detritus on the floor, like pallets, some old chairs, and a big metal plate. More on that later. However, above me, there was an open square hole which clearly led to another room inside what would be the top of the tower, where a ladder probably had been at one point. I forget how I got up there, probably piled up the aforementioned detritus, but once I got up there, I couldn't believe what I saw. The whole room was filled with hundreds of broken mirror shards, chained together by string and hanging from the ceiling, as well as all over the floor and the windowsills. Also scattered on the floor were what at first looked like dozens of big coins, but on closer inspection turned out to be the metal rims of those cheap little tea candles, stomped flat by people walking on them. Finally, in the center of the room, there was a tiny little table, on top of which was a metal bowl filled with more mirror shards, surrounded by more empty candles. I have no idea what the frick that room had been used for, but I swear to God it looked like some ritual crap was going down there. I took some pictures with my phone so my friends would believe me, but it was the middle of the night, all I had was a dim flashlight, and phone cameras were crap back then, so nothing really came out that well. Been exploring all kinds of things for years, on and off, in actual buildings, structurally questionable stairs or floors. You learn to tread carefully really freaking fast, and give things a good eyeball before putting weight on them. Nearly went through a few floor stairwells as a teenager exploring abandoned factories, buildings that dated back years, with tunnels and stuff. Bad air is the scariest thing ever. CO2 concentrates in deep spots with crap ventilation, so it's fairly easy to blunder into a place where you find yourself out of breath a lot but still breathing. If that happens, double back as fast as freaking possible. High concentrations of CO2 also tend to elicit a fear response. So if doing tunnel underground exploring and you find you are suddenly feeling extra jumpy and short of breath, back the frick out. Another scary thing with tunnels and such is the rotten eggs smell of H2S, hydrogen sulfide, which is an absurdly poisonous, smelly gas. If you smell it, and suddenly can't smell it anymore, it's time to get the frick out to fresh air. The most insidious thing about hydrogen sulfide is that it numbs the receptors that smell it at higher concentrations, and it is easily going to kill you stone fricking dead. Some old tunnels like disused sewer systems will contain this stuff. Finding empty houses that seem to just have been left as is for a few years is always creepy as heck. Also usually smells either funky, musty, or bad, rotting stuff, food, etc. depending on the vintage of the house. Only had one experience with abandoned farmland, but stumbling across animal bones while already a bit spooked is sure to get the heart pumping for a bit. While exploring things is never going to be a risk-free endeavor. Usually the most risk or the scariest thing is going to be getting picked up by the police or site security. Usually you can talk your way out of these situations quite readily. Just don't get arrested with any tools on you, or else it probably will go south. I have never been prosecuted or charged with anything for exploring physical locations. The worst was threats of prosecution and it taking a few weeks to get my camera back. On photos for whatever reason, from the police. That incident being entirely my own dang fault too. I was not particularly careful about avoiding being spotted getting into the place, an abandoned shopping center in an urban location, beside a busy road, with CCTV. Broke into an abandoned mansion in my hometown. Place has been empty for as long as I can remember. It stands on a massive property on the side of a busy road, and there is a big lake behind the house. I went in broad daylight. The property and hedges are large enough that I wasn't immediately visible from the road. Broken through a back window. The majority of the house was dark. Most of the windows and French doors had been boarded up. House was really creaky, like an old ship. There was a lot of really ugly late 60s early 70s furniture. Everything was gold or brown or orange. Found some mail in a front room, all dated around August 1995, so I figured that's when the former owners must have left, for whatever reason. In another room I found a kid's toys, but they didn't look old, they looked like someone had just been playing with them recently. In the kitchen, I found some empty cans of beans that also looked relatively new, and in the pantry, there were urine-soaked sofa cushions someone had been using as a bed. This is when I started to get freaked out, because obviously someone had been there somewhat recently, but they didn't seem to be there. I went up to the second floor. The floor of the upstairs hallway was so warped that it was curved in a rainbow shape, and was hard to walk down. In the last bedroom at the end of the hall, I found a room full of birthday cards. I mean hundreds of birthday cards. They all, in some way or another, were wishing someone named Eric a happy birthday, only that they were all written by the same hand. Most seemed to have been written with the same pen, even. Finally, I went up to the third floor. The hallway was so warped I had to brace myself against the wall. I had barely started when I heard movement from a bedroom a little ways down. It sounded like slapping and dragging. I stood as quietly as possible until a pair of filthy hands came out of the doorway and a man began to pull himself across the threshold into the hall. He wasn't groaning, I can't think of a word, but it was far more aggressive than groaning. I bolted, ran all the way down the stairs and back out the window I came in. I looked back but didn't see anyone following me. This happened in Suffolk County, Long Island back in June 2009. And no, not in Amityville. The mansion has since been torn down and the lot remains empty. My friends and I went into an old World War II bomb shelter in some woods when we were about 10 years old. In them we found very explicit drawings in pencil of cartoon characters naked doing sexual acts. Like Kim Possible, every Simpsons character and some Family Guy ones too. I went into an abandoned elementary school with some of my friends once. There was actually a homeless dude jerking off in the bathroom. I was 14 and had never seen a dong eye roll before. The school is in walking distance of my house and I avoid it at all costs, even now. High school, me and a few friends, including a girl that my best friend really liked and hoped to hook up with, had seen this abandoned, old house in the middle of the woods near a cow field, and we thought it would be a good idea to check it out in the middle of the night. We only had one flashlight, so mostly it was just the moon guiding us while the girls freaked out the entire time. We got into the house by climbing on a fallen log that fell right through the roof, and noticed certain things. An old plastic Christmas tree, moldy books, and a broken bowling ball. We wandered into a dark room away from the fallen tree, and tried to let our eyes adjust, and then the worst, putrid smell hit our noses, like rotting meat. We started talking, and then heard something scurry in the room, which wasn't a big room by any means. The girls started screaming, with the one girl my friend liked clutching onto him which he loved, and we heard whooshes of air like something moved past our faces. I had no idea what was happening, just that something real was in that room and we couldn't see it. But eventually the friend with the flashlight made it in, and we held our breath as he turned it on. In the middle of the room were two vultures with a disgusting piece of carrion just looking at us like we were crazy. Not as scary as it could have been, but it's crazy we were walking right into wild animals as they ate and had no idea. I always go in numbers and every time we leave a place we assume is completely abandoned, we always scream out, "If anyone is here, let your presence be known." Then 75% of the time we hear a yell or clapping. Then we freak the heck out, then try to convince ourselves that we didn't really hear anything. It's at that point when you realize you left with one more person than you had with you when you went in. There was a man living in the last one. It was something ripped straight out of a horror movie. He just saw us, rose to his feet and bolted it at us, screaming his head off. If you were sneaking around in an unabandoned house, you were the creepy one. There's an old abandoned slaughterhouse outside my hometown my friends and I used to go exploring in. One day during midday we were wandering around the upstairs when we heard people on the main floor talking. Kind of spooked, we quieted down and looked for some cracks in the very old floorboards to try and spy on the people downstairs. What we saw were three older guys, older than us, still in high school. They were smoking put off a pipe and after they finished they entered one of the rooms near the back of the plant, leaving the door ajar. We slowly made our way down the stairs, moving as quietly and as fast as we could. After making it to the main floor I decided I wanted to see what they were doing, so I slipped away from my friends heading to the car to try and get a peek. I moved 15 or 20 yards down from the front of the door and hid behind a stack of old planks and gravel. I looked in and could see that they were smoking again, and were fooling with a bunch of containers, some boiling, and with tubes. Holy crap, I thought to myself, we got some real life M-heads here. Then I realized that they probably wouldn't take kindly to my prying eyes and began moving out and back to the car. As I'm moving and trying to keep an eye on them, I knocked over some stuff. I honestly can't remember what. I remember scurrying to try and catch the stuff before it hit the ground. I failed. There was a loud crash and the frick was that. I bolted as fast as I could to the car screaming, "Start the freaking car." I jumped in the car and we peeled out. As the dust from the gravel road cleared I could see them standing by the door. There is this small town in the mountains on the way to a ski resort I used to work at and a lot of people go to. It's probably the weirdest town ever. One way in and way out by a bridge over a river that basically surrounds the town. Basically you go there during the day and the place is a ghost town. No one out. Once night falls, you start to see ladies pushing strollers, walking their dogs, etc. There is this old bed and breakfast there that has been abandoned for years. It was built in like 1890 or something like that. It was an inn for families to stay that had husbands that were loggers back 100 years ago. Story goes that there was this girl Alice that had a husband who died logging. She got word that he had been killed in an accident. She proceeded to hang herself in the attic of the inn. Was able to find old newspaper articles and archives that proved this true. A lot of people used to say they saw her walking the halls some time after she died. Employees that worked the bed and breakfast before it closed in the 90s reported lots of weird things happening. We used to go there and try and scare ourselves. I kid you not. One time we were shining flashlights in the top window, and slowly one of the curtains opened and stayed open for a few seconds then slowly closed. Note that the top floor no longer existed because it collapsed years earlier. There was no way anyone could be on the top floor. Pretty creepy. In Baghdad, I kicked in a door in an abandoned building after hearing strange noises. It was about 10 grown men having sex with a young teenage boy. The fricked up part, it wasn't our pay. The boy was a prostitute and was peed off that we had barged in. I used to read electric meters for a living way back in the day. One of my stops was at an old high school where the gymnasium had been converted into a broom factory. Since I love history, I asked the management there if I could check out the school itself. It was really cool seeing the vintage 1930s desks and old furnishings, as well as finding musty old books lying about. The scary part was when I came to a classroom where the floor was caving in, a full 6 feet in the center, and all the furnishings had slid into the middle with a sagging. It wasn't really scary until I felt the floor tremble beneath my feet and heard boards cracking, and I never entered it from the hallway. A guy with a shotgun camped out by my car, and when I came back he told me he had called the law on me for trespassing. He let me go, though. He just told me not to come back during hunting season because he almost shot me. Summer of 1992, we were exploring the old abandoned airport hangars at Republic Airport on Long Island. The hangars are no longer there. One night we were exploring and at some point a pickup truck drives right near us, which freaked us out, as it was desolate. So we take off. We return a few days later and everything is roped off, and we see signs for toxic waste dump site, or something along those lines. That's not the freaky part. Here's the freaky part. Right around the same time, Joel Rifkin, the serial killer, gets caught. He was caught with dead bodies in his vehicle. His vehicle was a pickup truck. He had been dumping bodies at the abandoned airport hangar. We probably came within a few feet of the dead bodies, as we had explored most of the hangar. Still freaks me out thinking it was probably his pickup truck we had seen that night, with dead bodies in tow. You've been spotted by the curious cow. Comment below and let him know what you're doing. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.